You see, the trouble with most of us is that we take life far too seriously, as if it were a grim contest, a struggle against the universe that must be won at all costs. But what if I told you that life is not a battle, nor a punishment, nor a puzzle to be solved? What if life is simply a game, an elaborate, cosmic game of hide and seek, in which you are both the seeker and the one hiding? When you understand this, everything changes. The anxieties, the burdens, the endless fear of failure, they dissolve, because in a game, failure is not the end. It is part of the play, but here's the strange thing. We have forgotten that we were supposed to play. We've convinced ourselves that the score matters more than the experience, that winning is more important than dancing. And so we grow stiff, frightened, obsessed with reaching goals that turn to dust the moment we touch them. The great hack, if you will, is to remember that the point of life is not to arrive, but to participate. To move, to laugh, to fall, and to rise again, like children absorbed in play. You hack life not by controlling it, but by loosening your grip. The tighter you hold, the more it slips through your fingers. Let go, and suddenly the world begins to cooperate with you, because you are no longer trying to bend it into submission. The paradox is this: the less you force life, the easier it becomes, because life itself flows like a river, and rivers are not pushed, they are followed. The rules of this game are simpler than you think. Every identity, every role you play is a mask, and the moment you realize that masks are not fixed, you can change them. You need not remain the dutiful worker, the obedient child, the anxious perfectionist. You may try on new costumes, new ways of being, for the game allows infinite characters. That is what freedom means, not freedom from the game, but freedom within it. And so the hack is to dance lightly, to laugh at your own seriousness, to let death itself be the final curtain call rather than the looming terror. For if life is a game, then every moment, whether you win or lose, has already been worth it because you played. And the true joy lies not in winning, but in realizing that you were free to play all along. Life, at its very core, is not the solemn trial we have been led to believe it is. From childhood, we are taught to approach existence as though it were a test that must be passed, a battlefield where victory is survival and failure is humiliation. Yet this perception blinds us to the most obvious and liberating truth, that life is, and always has been, a game. It is not a rigid, structured affair where every mistake is punished, but rather a flowing interplay of moves and responses, of beginnings and endings, much like the laughter of children who invent rules only to delight in breaking them. The difficulty is that as we grow, we forget. We forget that once upon a time we knew how to play. We forget the joy of risk without fear, of failure without shame, of living for the sheer experience of it. Instead, we begin to think that everything must be serious, calculated, and justified, as though the purpose of life were to accumulate points, trophies, and accolades. But in reality, the scoreboard is an illusion, and the only true measure of your existence is whether you danced with the game while you had the chance. To say life is a game is not to trivialize its struggles, but to transform the way we encounter them. Consider how a game works. There are obstacles, there are challenges, and there are moments of triumph and defeat. But none of these negate the fun of playing. They are the very essence of the game itself. If you played chess and expected every piece to cooperate, you would be bored. The resistance is what gives it meaning. Similarly, in life, we are not supposed to glide through without resistance. We are supposed to stumble, to face unpredictable turns, to be caught off guard, because without these, the game loses its vitality. What has made us suffer unnecessarily is not the struggle itself, but the idea that struggle means something is wrong, that difficulty is a punishment rather than an invitation to engage more deeply. And here lies the profound hack. The moment you reframe life from a heavy duty to a playful game, the burdens shift. Fear of failure becomes the thrill of risk. The anxiety of the unknown transforms into curiosity about what comes next. Even death itself ceases to loom like an executioner, and instead becomes the final round, the curtain call that gives shape to the entire play. To see life as a game is to awaken from the illusion of endless seriousness, to smile at the absurdity of existence, and to step onto the stage with the knowledge that no matter what happens, the act of participating was always enough. This is why children appear so alive, so vibrant, because they are still immersed in the game. They do not yet see the world through the rigid lenses of achievement and productivity. They play for the joy of it, and in that joy lies a wisdom we spend the rest of our lives trying to recover. To see life as a game is not to escape reality, but to meet it with the lightness it deserves. For in play, there is freedom, and in freedom, there is the possibility of truly living. The game of life, like all games, operates with rules, but the astonishing truth is that most of these rules are invented, and many of them can be changed. Society teaches us to treat them as fixed commandments, engraved in stone, but in reality, they are more like chalk marks on a playground, drawn and erased as the players see fit. We are told how to dress, how to behave, what careers matter, what forms of success are admirable, and we follow these as if our very survival depended on them. Yet if you pause for even a moment, you realize that much of this structure is arbitrary. Money is paper, status is performance, and even morality itself shifts from culture to culture, from age to age. The hack lies in recognizing the flexibility of the rules. You do not have to accept every condition that has been placed upon you, because most of them are inventions meant to keep the game predictable for those who claim authority over it. To hack the game, you must first learn to see it. This is not easy, for we are raised in immersion. The game is all we know, so its artificiality is invisible to us. But when you begin to notice that expectations differ depending on who you speak to, when you see that what one generation believed to be sacred truth is mocked by the next, you begin to realize that the rules are written in pencil, not ink. This realization is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it removes the comfort of certainty, but liberating because it hands you back your freedom. You are no longer a passive piece being moved by invisible forces. You are a player with the ability to question, bend, and rewrite the terms of engagement. Consider how many people waste their lives obeying rules that were never theirs to begin with. They work endlessly to achieve titles they do not care about. They sacrifice their time for rewards that do not nourish them. They shape their personalities to fit molds that suffocate them. This is the tragedy of taking invented rules too seriously. The game begins to play you instead of you playing the game. The great trick is not to abandon all rules, for without rules there is no play, but to choose consciously which ones you will accept, which ones you will modify, and which ones you will discard entirely. This is what separates the masters of life from its victims. The masters are not rebels for rebellion's sake. They are playful experimenters, bending the rules to create new strategies, new games within the game. They know the boundaries are not final, and because of this, they experience a freedom unknown to those who live under the illusion of rigidity. Once you learn that the rules are flexible, you begin to move differently. You laugh when others despair. You improvise when others freeze. You adapt where others break. This, perhaps, is one of the greatest hacks of all. Every game has players who take it too seriously, who confuse the tokens for treasure and the scoreboard for truth. In life, this mistake is everywhere. People chase after money, titles, possessions, and recognition as if these were the essence of existence, when in fact they are nothing more than symbols, markers of participation in the game. Money is paper or numbers on a screen, but people trade their very souls for it. Status is a performance of approval, a fleeting applause from an audience that is itself too busy worrying about its own applause to notice yours for long. The hack, then, is to realize that symbols are not reality. They are tools to play with, not prisons to die in. When you begin to see that the things you have been taught to worship are only tokens, the spell begins to break. You no longer suffer the constant anxiety of falling behind in a race that never ends, because you understand the race is invented. You stop defining yourself by how many tokens you have collected, because you see that even those who seem to win end up in the same ground as everyone else. The game of life is not about piling up more markers than your neighbor, but about how creatively and joyfully you use them while you are here. Most people cannot escape this illusion because they are raised inside it. From childhood, they are taught that grades measure intelligence, that medals measure worth, that salaries measure success, and that the approval of others measures identity. They grow into adults who chase endlessly, believing that at some point, once enough tokens are collected, fulfillment will arrive. But fulfillment never arrives in this way. You will always need more tokens because tokens do not satisfy hunger, they only fuel craving. The true hack lies in treating these markers lightly, like pieces in a game of chess or cards in a deck. They have their purpose, yes. They can be used strategically, and they allow you to navigate within the world. But they do not define you, and they do not have ultimate meaning. Once you can laugh at money, once you can wear status like a costume rather than a skin, once you can play with success instead of being owned by it, you gain a freedom that cannot be taken away. The tragedy is not that people play the game, but that they forget it is a game. The moment you remember, you reclaim power, and with it, you rediscover joy. One of the greatest hacks to life's game is realizing that uncertainty is not a flaw in the design, but the very essence of it. Imagine a game where you knew every outcome before you began. There would be no thrill, no tension, no reason to play at all. Yet in life, people crave certainty. They want guarantees, assurances, maps of the future so detailed that there is no risk of being lost. But in their search for security, they suffocate the very playfulness that makes existence alive. The truth is, uncertainty is what keeps you moving, what keeps you curious, what keeps you awake. Without it, life would be stale repetition, a mechanical loop with no depth. To hack life is to lean into uncertainty rather than resist it. Instead of demanding that everything be predictable, you recognize the wisdom of not knowing. You begin to understand that the unknown is where possibility lives, where growth emerges, where transformation becomes possible. The most meaningful moments in life, love, discovery, creativity, arise precisely because you cannot script them in advance. They come uninvited, they surprise you, they break the monotony of what you expected. If life were purely certain, you would be locked in the prison of inevitability. But uncertainty is freedom in disguise. The problem is that most people mistake uncertainty for danger. They treat it as a threat rather than an invitation. And so they cling tightly to plans, identities, routines, and rules, not realizing that by clutching to certainty, they shrink their existence. They trade wonder for comfort, exploration for safety, and end up trapped in small cages built of their own fears. But when you relax into the unknown, something remarkable happens. Life starts to reveal itself in colors you never noticed before. Opportunities arrive from places you could not have imagined. The unexpected ceases to be an enemy and becomes a companion. Think of it like surfing a wave. You cannot control the ocean, you cannot predict every swell, but you can learn to balance, to flow, to ride with grace. The uncertainty of the sea is not a problem. It is the very thing that makes surfing exhilarating. Life is the same. The waves will always come, and no matter how much you plan, you cannot master them all. But you can learn to ride, and in that act, you transform chaos into art. To embrace uncertainty is not to surrender to despair, but to open yourself to a deeper kind of freedom, where you trust the flow of life enough to let it surprise you. Another way to hack the game of life is to understand that failure is not the end of the game, but one of its most essential mechanics. In fact, without failure, there can be no real play, no growth, no true engagement. Failure, though dreaded by most, is what gives the game its texture, its challenge, its depth. Imagine again a game in which you could never lose. How long would you keep playing it? A victory that is guaranteed is hollow. A path without obstacles is nothing more than a flat line, a lifeless monotony. What most people misunderstand is that failure is not the opposite of success. It is the process by which success is made possible. Every misstep, every fall, every wrong turn contains information. It shows you the edges of your current ability, the limits of your understanding, the blind spots in your awareness. Failure is feedback. It is life whispering, "Not here, try again, look closer." The child who learns to walk stumbles countless times, but no one tells him he has failed. We see it for what it is, the necessary practice by which he strengthens his legs and finds his balance. Yet, as we grow older, we begin to judge our stumbles, to label them with shame, to shrink away from the very process that is teaching us how to walk through life. To hack the game is to strip failure of its sting by reinterpreting it. Instead of a mark of inadequacy, it becomes a sign of engagement. It proves that you are playing, that you are stretching yourself, that you are reaching beyond the known. In fact, if you never fail, it is likely you are playing too small, avoiding the edges of the game, staying within the narrow confines of safety. Failure, then, is not a curse, but a compass. It points to where you are learning, where you are alive. The deepest irony is that those who fear failure often end up failing in the most significant way. They fail to live. Their caution robs them of experience. Their need for control blinds them to discovery. Their obsession with success locks them in sterile routines. Yet, those who embrace failure, who treat it as an inseparable part of play, often find themselves more resilient, more creative, more fulfilled. They see life not as a test to be passed, but as a series of experiments, each outcome, whether triumph or collapse, simply another note in the great music of existence. Thus, failure is not to be avoided but welcomed. It is not an interruption of the game, but its very heartbeat. Without it, there is no movement, no transformation, no genuine joy in the eventual breakthroughs. The game becomes easier, paradoxically, when you stop trying to avoid losing and instead learn to lose with curiosity, with humor, with grace. For in every loss, life hands you the keys to a deeper level of the game. Another hack lies in recognizing that most of what weighs us down in this game is an illusion created by comparison. From the earliest years, we are trained to measure our worth against the achievements, possessions, and appearances of others. We are told who is ahead, who is behind, who is successful, who is failing. But if life is truly a game, then comparison is one of its most deceptive traps, for it convinces you that you are playing someone else's match rather than your own. No one sits down to a game of chess and asks, "How is the other board across the room doing?" The game is between you and the position you hold now, not between you and the stranger beside you. Comparison corrupts the very essence of play. It replaces joy with jealousy, curiosity with envy, engagement with resentment. The moment you believe that another person's path diminishes your own, you stop playing authentically and begin to mimic, to compete, to chase shadows. Yet in reality, each life is an entirely different game, with its own rules, its own landscape, its own objectives. The mistake is in assuming that you must conform to a singular scoreboard, that there is one standard measure of success by which all lives should be judged. This belief is poison, for it keeps you running endlessly on a track that is not yours. To break free from comparison is to remember that your game cannot be compared to another because it is not the same game. Someone else's victories do not rob you of your potential, nor do their failures shield you from your own lessons. Every human being plays against the mystery of existence itself, and each learns in their own rhythm, in their own fashion. To hack life is to release yourself from the tyranny of imitation, to stop borrowing dreams and instead craft your own. The irony is that when you stop comparing, you begin to flourish naturally. Your energy, once wasted on resentment or competition, becomes available for creativity, exploration, and authenticity. You stop hiding behind borrowed masks and begin to play with your true face. The unique contours of your character, once blurred by the effort to copy others, reveal themselves in their raw power. You stop asking whether you are ahead or behind, and instead focus on whether you are alive in this very move, this very moment. Comparison is not only a thief of joy, it is a thief of play itself. It tricks you into believing life is about winning against others, when in truth it is about playing fully with yourself and with the world. When you release the need to measure against another, the game shifts. It becomes lighter, freer, less rigid. You no longer play out of fear of losing or desperation to win. You play because the play itself is the point. Another hack lies in recognizing that most of what weighs us down in this game is an illusion created by comparison. From the earliest years, we are trained to measure our worth against the achievements, possessions, and appearances of others. We are told who is ahead, who is behind, who is successful, who is failing. But if life is truly a game, then comparison is one of its most deceptive traps, for it convinces you that you are playing someone else's match rather than your own. No one sits down to a game of chess and asks, "How is the other board across the room doing?" The game is between you and the position you hold now, not between you and the stranger beside you. Comparison corrupts the very essence of play. It replaces joy with jealousy, curiosity with envy, engagement with resentment. The moment you believe that another person's path diminishes your own, you stop playing authentically and begin to mimic, to compete, to chase shadows. Yet, in reality, each life is an entirely different game with its own rules, its own landscape, its own objectives. The mistake is in assuming that you must conform to a singular scoreboard, that there is one standard measure of success by which all lives should be judged. This belief is poison, for it keeps you running endlessly on a track that is not yours. To break free from comparison is to remember that your game cannot be compared to another because it is not the same game. Someone else's victories do not rob you of your potential, nor do their failures shield you from your own lessons. Every human being plays against the mystery of existence itself, and each learns in their own rhythm, in their own fashion. To hack life is to release yourself from the tyranny of imitation, to stop borrowing dreams and instead craft your own. The irony is that when you stop comparing, you begin to flourish naturally. Your energy, once wasted on resentment or competition, becomes available for creativity, exploration, and authenticity. You stop hiding behind borrowed masks and begin to play with your true face. The unique contours of your character, once blurred by the effort to copy others, reveal themselves in their raw power. You stop asking whether you are ahead or behind and instead focus on whether you are alive in this very move, this very moment. Comparison is not only a thief of joy, it is a thief of play itself. It tricks you into believing life is about winning against others, when in truth it is about playing fully with yourself and with the world. When you release the need to measure against another, the game shifts. It becomes lighter, freer, less rigid. You no longer play out of fear of losing or desperation to win. You play because the play itself is the point. The final hack is perhaps the most profound, learning to embrace impermanence. Every game has an ending, every play has a curtain call, and life itself is no exception. Yet most people resist this truth. They cling to permanence, to possessions, to identities, to relationships, believing that if they can hold on tightly enough, they will not have to face the inevitable dissolution. But this clinging only turns the game into suffering, for it transforms what is meant to be fluid into something brittle, something always on the verge of breaking. To hack life is to realize that the temporality of everything is not a tragedy, but the very essence of play. A symphony is beautiful precisely because it does not last forever. A sunset moves us because its colors fade, The blossom on a tree is breathtaking because it will fall. What gives life its depth is the fact that no moment repeats, no breath returns. When you accept impermanence, you are liberated from the desperate urge to control, to hoard, to preserve what cannot be preserved. You begin to flow with the changing patterns rather than resist them, and in doing so, you discover an ease that cannot be found in grasping. Impermanence is not an enemy but a teacher. It reminds us that what matters is not how long something lasts, but how deeply we meet it while it is here. Relationships, achievements, and even our own existence gain meaning not through their endurance, but through the intensity of our presence within them. Life becomes less about preservation and more about participation. You stop asking, "How do I keep this forever?" and start asking, "How do I live this fully while it is here?" The freedom that comes with embracing impermanence is immense. You are no longer terrified of endings because you understand that endings are what allow beginnings to arise. You are no longer paralyzed by the fear of loss because you see that loss is not annihilation but transformation. Even death itself, the final ending, ceases to be a horror and instead becomes the natural closing of a game that was always meant to be played, not clutched. When impermanence becomes a companion rather than an enemy, every moment becomes luminous. You taste food more vividly, you love more honestly, you laugh more freely, because you know none of it will return. The ordinary becomes extraordinary simply because you no longer take it for granted. And this, above all, is the ultimate hack of the game of life. When you embrace impermanence, you finally understand that you do not need to force the game to last forever. You only need to play it wholeheartedly while it is here,